Welcome to Codex History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And today we're talking Chapter 15 in the Ultimate History of Video Games Volume 2 by Stephen L. Kent. And this chapter is called Wii Wins.
Oh, yeah. I'm loving this book. You should definitely buy it. If you haven't yet, please buy Ultimate History of Video Games Volume 2 because we just talk about it every week, but there's like a ton of awesome, great information here and like direct quotes that are really fun. So please buy it. So we're talking about Chapter 15, which, as you said, is called Wii Wins. And so by mid-2007, that's sort of the timeline we're in here, which is crazy to me that is old enough to be considered history now, because I was like a grown person and have vivid memories from those days. But by mid-2007, Sony was shoring up their troubles with PS3 inventory, unlike 2022, where it's still impossible to find a PS5 anywhere. I know the current issue isn't solely a Sony problem. I'm just salty about it because I want my friends to be able to get a PS5 and they can't get PS5s. Anyway, PS3 sales weren't doing so great at that point in 2007, and it wasn't because Sony couldn't make enough consoles. The book does a comparison to how much the PS3 had sold at that point compared to the PS2 at the same point in its lifetime. Basically, in Japan, the PS3 had sold 1.7 million units about a year and a half into its run, while the PS2 had sold 7.4 million at the same point in its own lifespan. So the PS3 wasn't selling well. And neither was the Xbox 360. Because a few weeks back, we talked about Microsoft's efforts to be more successful in Japan. They called it just the 360 in Japan. They stopped calling it Xbox because Xbox means is like not a good thing to name something in Japan just because of the way X is in their culture. So it's like seen as like bad or unwanted. So it's like unwanted box. I don't like this box, like that kind of thing. And so you wouldn't want to call something Xbox there.
Would you like
so
to
we're
play
just calling
a
it
game
360
on my unwanted box?
Yeah, exactly. And like, why would I buy that? That sounds silly. But Microsoft had also courted big-name Japanese studios to make games for the 360, and they were fairly successful in getting some games. They still weren't selling well. They would talk about it if they compared themselves to the original Xbox, which is how they always talked about their sales in Japan at that point in time. They were like, we're doing way better, which is true. They were doing way better, but they still weren't doing very well. So if PS3s and Xbox 360s weren't selling well, then what was? Were Japanese gamers just done gaming? Was it over? Was the fad done? Bubble popped? Were the PS2s and GameCubes good enough? Nope. It was Nintendo, obviously. Nintendo had sold twice as much as the PS3 and the Xbox 360 combined in Japan for the Wii, which was their brand new console at the time. Seriously, more than twice as much as those two combined. And while the Xbox 360 sold more than the others in 2006 because it had a year-long head start on the competition, Nintendo totally destroyed the competition in 2007. They were a little bit cheaper, and I guess they didn't have the supply problems that PlayStation had.
And they didn't have the Red Ring of Death problems that Microsoft had.
That's right. They didn't have the Red Ring problem. We'll talk about that pretty soon here today. So basically what we're looking at by the end of 2007 is this. Microsoft got the head start that they wanted with a pricey Red Ring problem about to cause them to take a huge hit, but Nintendo fought back with the Wii and put themselves in another league. And I would argue that even today, when you compare game consoles, you almost never include Nintendo in that comparison. It's always just Sony versus Microsoft because Nintendo is just either wildly outselling or they're trying to accomplish something different such that comparing the sales numbers doesn't make sense. Which I think is where they're at with the Switch right now. Like the Switch is trying to be something different from the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X.
Yeah, and I would say too that this is the beginning of that, right? The Wii, because GameCube, They were still kind of trying to be in the mix with PlayStation and Xbox, but now it's just all different, you know?
Yep. Instead of choosing to focus on graphics, like with the 360 and the PS3, Nintendo was like, we'll upgrade the GameCube a little bit, add in a cool new controller, and we're going to call that good, sell it for cheap, and have a lot of fun games for it. And that worked for them. So the PS3 was having both supply troubles and troubles with having no games, so it was in firm last place in the worldwide by the end of 2007. It was doing better than the Xbox 360 was in Japan, but it still wasn't doing great. And that's only really because the 360 was just having a tough time there. I wouldn't say that's anything Sony did better than Microsoft, so much as Microsoft was just still stumbling from the original Xbox having been not great over there.
Definitely. I also feel like a lot of the times in this whole book, every time we've talked about a console not doing well, it's been the company being their own worst enemy in a way.
Yep.
It's never really the other company's strategy. Maybe influences it, but not a ton.
Yeah, it's almost never like, oh man, Xbox was so much better. It's really just like, PlayStation was just bad.
Yeah, or Xbox was just really making this red ring thing happen because they rushed it,
Yeah. So what's an executive to do when they're perceived as having failed? Well, they've got to step down. Ken Kudaragi stepped down from his spot at PlayStation, making room for Kaz Hirai to step in and make some big changes. It was framed as an amicable separation for which Kudaragi made the decision himself to retire. But the rumors in the industry were that he'd been fired and basically just given sort of a generous severance package, and they were going to sort of pretend it was mutual. Kent points out that this is like pretty standard for huge positions at large corporations. They don't really want to admit that somebody that high up has been fired for like underperformance. So they'd rather just sort of get rid of the person without making a huge deal out of it, get a new person in. And I think that works well for both sides. Shareholders are happy because the company doesn't have to come out here and say, hey, we've been on a bad path. And the executive gets to walk away saying, I didn't fail, and go on to some other company where maybe they'll fail again, or maybe they'll take their learnings and do a lot better job over there,
Yeah, I definitely think this was obviously I don't think Kudaragi's happy about it, but it's better than a big blow up, Like in America, for example, when someone gets fired, it's usually news in a big company.
Yeah, and it's a like people get fired. Well, people step down over here a lot all the time too. When you like everybody sort of knows that they got fired, but they're allowed to step down.
Like before,
sort of the same thing happens
before they even say like I'm stepping down because I know I would get fired if I didn't.
Yeah, they don't say it. Yeah, they don't say it like that. But yes, everybody knows that.
That's the subtle meaning behind it. Totally.
Yeah, that's right. Kudaragi was also like kind of a firecracker at Sony. He had a bit of a reputation as like a Steve Jobs type that would like yell and like generally be unpleasant to be around. So there were a lot of people at Sony who were like, let's get this guy out of here. He's A, messing up, and B, not fun to be around. So why keep him around? So it's probably for the best that he retired. I say retired in air quotes.
Yeah, I find it weird. They mentioned this in the book where like they tell a story about how they went and Kudaragi and another coworker went to go watch a presentation, and the person that was with him was like, oh, that was pretty good. And then Kudaragi just calls him an idiot and like lays into him. And I'm like, why are you taking this from this guy? Like, I don't understand this idea that a genius has to be super aggressive and mean, No, I don't get
agree.
it. I also feel like now maybe I don't even know if it's a different time thing, because I don't think that would fly today. Like if you're being a jerk, you're going to get let go.
Well, maybe it depends, because like the shareholders for something at like a position that high, like the shareholders are kind of the ones that end up making the decision at some point. And if the guy's making them money, that's all shareholders care about.
That's the evil of money right there. Yeah.
So once the money stops coming in, then it becomes easy to say, well, this guy's also a jerk. Get him out of here. And also being the nice guy in that scenario doesn't let you keep your job either. So
that's true. I mean,
there are plenty of executives who are jerks still, I'm sure, at lots of companies. Although you are right, I think it's becoming less tolerated by workers or people who are lower on the.
Because they were talking about him like screaming at people and like berating for like hours at a time. It wasn't like when you have like a bad day at work or someone has a bad day at work and blows up on you and they're like, oh, sorry later. It's like, no, he would lay into you for hours and then not apologize. And it would be like, okay, that's just the way it is. And it's like, what? No.
That's shouldn't be that way. Why are you allowing this to happen? Yeah. So the book then now shifts perspectives to Microsoft. So we're in 2007. What's going on over at Microsoft? This little section is called Closing the Red Ring. And Microsoft at this point is dealing with a pretty big problem, probably their biggest problem of this generation. And one that can be directly attributed to them wanting that year-long head start on Sony and Microsoft. And yes, we're going to talk about it again here, the Red Ring of Death. We're back here because it was big. It was a big deal during this time. And so we kind of have to be constantly checking in to be like, well, how's this Red Ring thing going on over at Microsoft, right? So at this point, they're still denying it as an issue. Like by early 2007, mid 2007, they're still denying it. They're saying, hey, some consoles are failing. Yeah, that's normal. Like electronics fail. But, it's nothing out of the ordinary. But that really only works for so long because the dead consoles were piling up, and it was becoming clear to both Microsoft and consumers that there was something here beyond just normal failure of a small number of consoles. By now, the team had seen enough faulty consoles to know one thing. This problem wasn't just one thing, and it wasn't going to be easy to fix. It wasn't like it was a bad batch of consoles or like a bad batch of parts that like tainted like, a few hundred or a few thousand consoles. It was inherent to the design of every single Xbox 360. Like it was something that just like was a problem of just the way the thing was designed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to be cheap to do the right thing.
I like here that we finally get kind of the answer, and it's a this causes this kind of situation. You're about to go into it, I think, right? So it's like, yeah. I was happy when I read this that we got the answer of what it officially is.
Yeah. So a lot of the time, the issue stemmed from overheating of the graphics chip and insufficient cooling. So the graphics chip got hot for one, and it didn't have sufficient cooling for two. And I mean, I guess a chip can get as hot as you want as long as you're able to cool it. So any overheating problem is really just insufficient cooling, I suppose. But over time, the constant heating and cooling down that happens to a system as you turn it on, use it, it heats up, and then you turn it off and it cools down. Like that heat expansion and contraction kind of took its toll on the motherboard because it got too hot. And so that caused it to warp and cause problems, specifically for the GPU. And the CPU to a smaller extent, because those get pretty hot as well. So what they did at first was they redesigned the cooling systems for future Xbox 360s, and that generally worked pretty well. That was a redesign known as Falcon. And if you're interested in like the Xbox 360 modding scene, like I am, you know that the Falcon revision of the system was generally much more reliable than the original, which was codenamed Xenon. It also had an HDMI port, so that was pretty cool. Zephyr was a revision that came in between Xenon and Falcon. That was the one that added the HDMI port, and it used better, more efficient cooling as well. But it was the same hardware underneath on the Zephyr. Like the Zephyr and the Xenon were basically the same with different cooling. Falcon used a newer 65 nanometer CPU, which ran cooler, required less power, and generally had many fewer problems. And that like kind of solves it. I mean, I'm not going to say a Falcon never had a red ring of death, but like they were much less prone to failure because the CPU ran on a smaller process, and that means it was more power efficient and thus cooler. So,
I want to say I've identified my 360 as being a Falcon, by the way, because it definitely has the HDMI port, but I don't think, because the Xenon was such a short window that I think I have a Falcon. But didn't they also mention they replaced, I want to say it was like a little bronze plate with an actual like heat sink. They said it was like a 50-cent part that they replaced with a $5 part. It was the cooling system, like the heatsink was just bad that they used before. Yeah, as in there wasn't one, I think, or it was like that little piece of metal. Yeah, it just didn't really do anything. So
or they used a different material for it. Maybe I think copper is generally like aluminum is cheaper for heatsinks. I think copper is better. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm like this is pulling from my own memories here how computers are.
I mean that sounds right as far as like something that like takes and spreads heat. Copper, you know.
Yeah, so using copper was better, but it was more expensive. So lots of there are a lot of heat sinks that will use both. That will be kind of aluminum and copper. If you go full aluminum, you're taking a risk, but you're paying less for it. And Microsoft sort of cheaped out there, and they paid the price for it, I suppose.
In the tone of $1 billion.
Yeah. So what were they going to do to fix the problem? They had a couple of different options. They could totally recall the product and have every single person with an Xbox 360 launched before the Falcon revision just send their 360s in before they inevitably failed and got a replacement. Kent recalls the year 1983 when the Famicom had a faulty circuit in it, and Hiroshi Yamauchi recalled every single Famicom in Japan to make sure that like the issue got fixed. This was an option for Microsoft, but the scale at which the 360 was at over 20 years after the Famicom incident meant that it wasn't a very feasible option for them to do that. Also, a recall is generally only done when there's like some sort of safety problem. Like people could get hurt from the problem with Famicoms. 360s weren't like catching on fire or burning people or like making people get hurt. They were just dying. So it was a really serious problem, but in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't serious enough to warrant like a recall in that sense, right? So what did they do? Do you remember what they did, Mike?
They extended the warranty and then lost $1 billion.
That's right. Yeah, they extended the warranty of every single 360 by 3 years. And this warranty covered the red ring of death. So and it was very, very, very expensive.
If I remember correctly, there was still only a 1-year warranty on other problems. Like if your power supply got all messed up or whatever, it could be covered in this 3-year warranty. Yeah. It was like just specific to the red ring of death and heating and cooling of the Xbox 360.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they were like, look, we kind of know this is going to happen to you eventually. Maybe it doesn't. There are some people who have like, I still have my launch Xbox 360 and it never broke. Like, good for you. But like, generally speaking, on a long enough timeline, all these 360s are going to fail. So they were like, look, when it fails, call us up. We're not going to ask any questions. We're just going to replace it or fix it. And it cost them $1 billion. But that was a hit.
Can I go on a little tangent here,
Oh,
by
yeah,
the way?
absolutely.
Because I was watching a video about taking apart, like, the quality of a refurbishment of an Xbox that you buy at, say, a store like GameStop. Someone ordered a bunch of them and, like, checked them out. When you open the original Xbox One, speaking of, this reminded me because of Microsoft engineering weirdness of consoles with the 360. You know, there's a giant empty space in the original Xbox One where a power supply could have fit, and they just didn't put it in there.
Really?
Yeah. I was watching this video, and he took it, and he opened it up. He's like, look, there's a spot right there. They could have put the power supply there. And it was a huge empty space. And I wonder if it was for cooling now, because they learned from this incident, like, we're not going to jam everything inside of there because of a cooling issue. So we're taking the power supply out.
That would make a lot of sense. They originally engineered it so that it would have that spot for it. And they're like, cool, we're going to have the power supply built in. This is going to be great. And then they probably worked on it and we're like...
this is entirely an assumption, by the way. I have no idea. But I was watching this video of this guy tearing them apart. And I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah. No, I like that. That would explain it, because I think if they could have everything they wanted, they would include the power supply inside the thing. Or conversely, maybe the power supply is something they knew they were kind of cheaping out on, and they were like, well, it's cheaper to just replace a power supply than it is to replace a whole system or have somebody send in their whole console. And they're like, so if we make it external, we can just send people new power supplies when they break. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if the power supply has problems or not on the Xbox One, but I do know that some of the early ones did have fans in them, so they did run warm. So I think your heating angle is probably the right one.
Also, I have the old power supply where it makes a really annoying buzzing sound when it's on.
Yeah.
It's super frustrating. Ugh. Yeah. But my Xbox One, launch Xbox One, still kicking it, still going strong. Amazing.
No red ring. You know what? If you don't put red rings inside the Xbox One, can't red ring.
That's right.
Boom. Solved it for him. But that $1 billion was a hit that Microsoft could take, and Robbie Bach knew that. So there's a quote in the book from him about how Microsoft could handle this. He says, a smaller company would have either just dealt with the consumer trust and PR hit, or they would have just straight up gone out of business. Like he says, like if this happened to Fitbit, that would have been the end, right? Which is a yikes for me. But the decision to fix everyone's Xbox that broke, no questions asked, that was the right call. It was very expensive, but they could afford it, and that's what kept them in the game. So here's a question I have for you, Mike. Do you think it was worth the year-long head start on the competition? Do you think that getting that head start was worth $1 billion and the consumer trust hit that they took? Because even though they did the right thing, like the fact that it happened at all is still like kind of a hit, right? Like,
I don't think it's worth it. No.
You don't think it's worth it?
I mean, we're going to get some numbers later, I think. I don't know if they happen in this chapter of the 360 sales, but I don't think it's enough to equate. Like, they didn't balance out that $1 billion, But that is
you don't think so?
Just units. I mean, who knows about peripheral sales, Microsoft Studios games, like that kind of stuff. I have no idea if they profited, but to me, it doesn't seem very worth it because they had to do all this stuff, And that's $1 billion. This is a lot.
It's a lot of money. And there is some, so they do get some goodwill for having done the right thing for it. Like if this were to happen again, I don't know if Sony would make the right choice, but I know that Microsoft would, right? And so that kind of stuff factors in when you're thinking about which system to buy or which ecosystem to become a part of. I don't think it was worth it. Like, should they have just waited a year and not had a red ring problem? Yeah, maybe. But yeah.
I don't even know if it would have been a year of waiting to just do more testing. It probably would have been a couple more months, but realistically, did someone, because they have people they have professional engineers designing this console. Yeah. And that heating thing is a pretty big oversight.
Yeah. It was explained somewhere they had cheaped out on one of the, the testing, the companies that they contracted out their testing to. They were like, we need extra money and or time to do this specific kind of testing to make sure that everything's good. And Microsoft was like, nah, it'll be fine. You don't have to do that. And it saved them a few million bucks or something.
Ooh, a few million?
And allowed them to launch earlier.
A few million to a 1 billion.
Yeah. But also being on the market a year, I think there's an intangible value to that. I don't know if it's worth $1 billion, but I think there's something there that makes it I don't know.
Well, they set the tone for online gaming with the 360. So that might have been worth it alone, just because their online platform was the one that was considered the best at the time. Regardless of what you think, it's everyone loved Xbox Live.
Yeah, it certainly was in 2006. Yeah.
Yeah, so that might be a reason that they should have got out a year early. And they did do well.
Yeah.
They did pretty well with sales. Like, they ran out of consoles. So, I mean, but that wasn't very good because they just had manufacturing problems. But still, so who knows?
and being ahead of the curve on things like online, like you talked about, like that's a year that Sony wouldn't have gotten to. So like Sony would have still been a year behind probably. Like they would have launched at the same time, but they would have looked so bad comparatively that, yeah, maybe waiting a year and ends up working out for Microsoft because now these two consoles came out at the same time and one is like clearly better and had like a year longer in the cooker, right? Whereas like the PS3 would have come out at the same time, but it wouldn't have had a year of Xbox 360 to basically say, okay, what did they mess up on that we can not mess up on? So probably the PS3 would have been worse when it came out.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. It would have, because they would have both come online immediately and people would have seen the big difference between the online play of Xbox and PlayStation at the time.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know we've had some emails, people disagreeing, but I think I think it's safe to say a majority of the people felt like the Xbox online environment was better than PlayStation's.
Yeah.
But I mean, I did have friends that were diehard PlayStation fans, so who knows?
Well, they didn't have to pay for their online, so that's like worth something.
Is true.
Usually the arguments are like not so much whether was Xbox Live better, but was it worth the money? Like PlayStation 3 was like almost as good, but was free, and so like I mean that means something, I guess.
Yeah, totally. But yeah,
but
I mean,
Xbox Live was way better.
This was our episode of the Codex What If scenario. So
yeah, we should do some that would be a really fun like what if.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah, write it down. That would be fun. Like,
we kind of did it last episode with the Tom Kalinske thing.
Yeah, like what if the 32X never came out, and then we can just like write what would Sega be doing in 2022 if the 32X had never come out? Oh, that would be really fun to.
I was gonna say It's not really history, but I mean honestly, we're a history podcast, but people judge us all the time, so who knows?
Well,
we can do what we want.
And the history, I don't know. I think knowing the history allows you to inform like predictions of what an alternate history would be too. You know,
and that's fun.
That could be really fun.
You know, it's our version of Man in the High Castle, but with video games.
Exactly. You got to have a lot of history knowledge to do something like Man in the High Castle.
That's right.
So, yeah. Anyway, I think in the long term, it worked, and obviously it worked out for Microsoft in the long term. And I applaud Microsoft for thinking long term and not just about quarterly earnings, because if they just continued to bury their head in the sand and act like this wasn't a problem, or not like say yes it's a problem but not fix people's Xboxes, like people would have just stopped buying Xboxes. They would have been like, Microsoft doesn't do the right thing here. I can't trust them. I'm going to go buy a PlayStation or a Wii or whatever. So I'm glad. I think the choice to fix this was definitely the right choice, even though it cost $1 billion.
I also applaud Steve Ballmer for just saying we're doing it, you know, because he was the one that was kind of against the Xbox originally. So it's nice that he had a turnaround to be like, nope, we got to do it. So
yeah, because he could have been like, I told you guys this was a bad idea, and just like been like, shut it down. We're not doing Xbox anymore. I can't be losing $1 billion on this, right? That could have happened. But totally. He said, do the right thing. And that's a larger brand discussion as well. Like if Ballmer makes that call to just cut off the Xbox or to not do the right thing here, Microsoft as a whole takes a big hit, not just Xboxes, right? Like next time I go to buy another Microsoft thing, if I'm thinking about buying Office for my office, or like a bunch of Windows licenses or something, I'm going, ooh, but they kind of messed up on this Xbox thing and then didn't do the right thing. What if they messed up on a Windows thing or an Office thing? Would they do the right thing? And I don't think they want to jeopardize that brand as well. So they kind of had to keep it around, I think. Yeah, totally. He would have just, who would have bought a Zune? Exactly. Nobody would have bought Zunes. Oh, wait. So they devised a program where first of all, they reimbursed people who had already paid for repairs, because during that period of time where they were like, this isn't a problem, they were charging people for repairs because it was out of warranty. Like I think they had a 90-day warranty normally. So if it was past 90 days, they were just like, sorry, it's not under warranty. You need to pay for these repairs. So they reimbursed everybody who had already paid for repairs. And then they worked out a deal with FedEx to get customers boxes, or as we called them back in the day, coffins, where you would just empty box would show up on your doorstep from FedEx, and the idea was you would put your 360 in the box, you would close it up, seal it off, you would say a little prayer, then you would send it off to Microsoft to either get it repaired or to get it replaced. And then they would get their console back. And this was all at no cost to the customer. So no shipping, none of that. You would just be without your console for a week or two while it shipped to Microsoft and they shipped you a new one back. But you would get a working system back for $0. Like nothing, you would not have to spend any money. I want to say that there was an option where you would like give them your credit card and they would like put a hold on it and then ship you a new Xbox right away. And then you would send them the old one in that box that they send you. So you could like save a week of time that way if you were willing to put a hold on your credit card. It still ended up costing you nothing. You just needed to be able to like show that, you know, you could give them money for an Xbox if you didn't send your old one back.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good solution too.
Yeah, it was a much quicker solution also, which is, I know that was the big problem when this happened to all my friends. They were like, man, I'm going like a month without an Xbox here. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That was not fun. So it was also around this time that Peter Moore pieced out of Microsoft and he went to his dream job, which was running EA Sports. Peter Moore loved games and he loved sports. And he was very proud of the work he had done on building the Xbox 360, but when the opportunity came for him to run EA Sports, he couldn't say no. Some people thought that he was like leaving in shame over the Red Ring thing, but honestly, at least to hear him tell it, and I believe this too, I think that was just timing. Like that bad stuff happened, and also he got a pretty good deal to go work at EA, doing the thing that he would have. I don't think there's anything that would have kept him at Microsoft, right? If that's your dream gig to run EA Sports, like of course you take it no matter what when it comes along. So he would be replaced by Don Matrick. And I'm sure we'll talk about him in the future. So yeah, that's kind of where Microsoft is at this point in time. We're talking like mid to late 2007. So we're still in the early parts of this generation of consoles.
Yeah, and we're going to now, like, the next section of this chapter is titled Stumbling to First Place. And it opens about a figure we've actually talked on the podcast before, is Isao Okawa? And Okawa was the wealthiest man in Japan, and he's also the one who bailed out Sega. Remember this, Tyler?
Mm-hmm.
Like Sega was his baby, and when he passed away in 2001, if you recall, he forgave Sega's $40 million loan and returned all of his stock back to the company.
Wow, he just really loved Sega, didn't he?
He just really loved him, and you know what? You got to respect it. So
I respect that. Like if you really love something and you've got the means and the money to like keep it afloat when it looks like things are pretty bad, like by all means, like you should totally do that. I think you made the right call.
I think so too. And Kent highlights this here to show kind of an important trend in kind of in Japan, but also the world. So right after Akawa passed, there was a brief stint where a real estate developer named Akira Mori was the wealthiest person in Japan. And then after that, that was taken over by Hiroshi Yamauchi of Nintendo. And I think this is kind of to show like, hey, you know, it's 2007. We're kind of seeing video games come to the forefront of big business. So with that, let's talk some more about sales and numbers. Now, Kent's got a lot of statistics in this section, but I've kind of boiled it down to saying everyone loves Nintendo in 2007, and we outsold Sony and Microsoft put together by 6.8 million units in 2007. So
dang,
the Wii is on top of the world at this point. And it was also at this time that a big change came at Sony with their PlayStation 3 models and what they offered. And I actually remember this. I remember this moment because this was a big deal back when this happened. Sony dropped the price of their launch 60 gigabyte PS3s to $499. Remember, the price was originally $599. So a $100 drop. To get rid of them, they wanted to essentially get rid of this stock. And then they offered a new 80 gigabyte model for $499. But the 80 gigabyte model had no backwards compatibility.
With PS2?
Yeah, with PS2. Oh. And Jack Tretton, of course, who, I mean, he's made a lot of silly quotes in this book, I feel like, but this one might be one of his silliest. He says, if you paid $599 for a machine that had backwards compatibility, now $529 gets you a PS3 and a PS2. You can just stack them on top of each other if you want to.
Okay, that's right up there with the Don Matrick. Like, we have a product for people who can't go online. It's called the Xbox 360. When people were talking about Xbox One and remember when it had that like always online requirement when they first announced it. He's like, if you can't go online, that's okay. We have a product for you. It's called Xbox 360.
I'm just like,
are you kidding me?
He's like, really? Come on, you're gonna do this right now? But yeah, so I feel like he's trying to make light of a situation, but Tyler, a discussion episode on backwards compatibility seems like it would be a really good topic.
I would love to do that. Yeah, that would be fun.
I know that was a big deal for me, especially at this time, because as a poor college student, I wanted to keep playing the games I had. And I could do that on the 360. But yeah, the PlayStation, that was so rude. Anyway, so what was Microsoft doing and how were they doing at this time? We'll say fine. You kind of talked about it a little bit with Peter Moore leaving, but they were still doing horrible in Japan, even though they sold more 360s than original Xboxes in that launch window. They sold more 360s than all of the Xboxes they'd ever sold in Japan. So that was pretty good for them. But online functionality was really carrying them in the UK and the US specifically. But again, like Nintendo Wii's could not be made fast enough. And you'd think there'd be a bunch of like respect for Nintendo, and Sony and Microsoft would finally be like, oh, you know what? There's something going on here. Like, we got Nintendo like coming at us. No, they did not care. In fact, both of them equated the Wii still to a fad. Robbie Block has a quote on page 380 saying, quote, Nintendo was never really a threat. Nintendo was, as you say, a great toy company. It still is, end quote.
My dude, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, they just keep doing it. And then Sony, meanwhile, echoed that the Wii and PS3 weren't even a comparison to one another, which, I mean, is true. And I guess for Nintendo, a good thing. And we kind of talked about this at the beginning of the episode, but this is still holding true to the day with Switch outselling both Xbox and PlayStation. But Sony and Microsoft are at each other's throats while Nintendo's just making buckets of money,
Yeah, it's true that they're not a comparison. I don't think in a way that is favorable to PlayStation, though. At the time, they're like, oh, it's not even a comparison. It's like, yeah, Wii is totally like kicking your butts up and down the court. Yeah, it's not a comparison. You don't make yourself look better by saying that.
Yeah. And it's also, I should mention, too, Nintendo CEO Satoru Iwata at the time was fine with it. And he said, quote, I wouldn't say there is no overlap between the group of customers Sony is targeting and the group of users that Nintendo is targeting, but that overlap is quite small, end quote. So he's kind of admitting that they're not really trying to do the same thing. And we all kind of knew, like, Nintendo's not really looking at the hardcore gamer base. They're really branching out with the Wii. They're selling to like older people and to parents to play games with their kids, have like a Wii bowling night, and it's working. And for Nintendo, there were no cares in the world at this time. Nintendo in 2008 sold 20 million consoles, so they outpaced PS3 nearly 3-1. So now we have a battle for second place with this generation. And the next part that Kent goes into, I find really fascinating, because it's actually about how players used their consoles in 2007 and 2008. Like, we talk a lot about the numbers and like sales and stuff, but this is statistics on how players actually used their consoles. And I think we're hopefully, because we're kind of getting closer to modern day and these stats started to matter and were tracked for that matter too, we're going to start seeing more statistics like this. So a typical Xbox and PlayStation user in 2007, 2008 used their consoles in roughly 3-hour blocks. So you'd sit down and you'd play a game for 3 hours, right? Meanwhile, Nintendo users used their Wiis in 45-minute blocks. And a lot of them only played Wii Sports.
Yep.
And Kent kind of compares this to when Pong was like hardwired into a game console, which is like what I find that kind of funny. But then what he found out was actually Wii owners bought just as many games as Xbox 360's owners, about roughly 4 per console on average. And actually PlayStation owners bought less, an average of 2 per console.
Because PlayStation has no games.
Boom, roasted. It's not like the Wii people are not buying games, And in 2007, we released Wii Play, which was a game that was bundled with a Wii remote for $49.99, which is only $10 more than just getting a Wiimote by itself. So you might as well buy Wii Play because you get a Wiimote and you get a game with it for $10 more.
Yeah, I remember being very tempted by that. I don't think I ever did that, but I was like, oh yeah. I remember Wii remotes being hard to find and then being like, oh, but I can get one easily if I buy Wii Play. I don't think I wanted Wii Play, so I ended up not doing it, but I remember like making that call.
It's important to mention that Stephen L. Kent definitely uses the term Wiimote in this paragraph. So I was excited because I'm like, we're not the only ones that do it. Like everyone has it in their vocabulary that it was Wiimote, even though it's not. What we really had going for it to increase profits was this quote from Kent on page 382. And that is, quote, approximately 40% of all Wii software sold was published by Nintendo. Of the all-time top 25 best-selling games released for Wii, 23 were published by Nintendo. The two exceptions, Just Dance and Just Dance 2 from Ubisoft, came in at numbers 17 and 19.
Wow.
Yeah, being the first-party publisher on your own console, like you're just rolling in the dough.
Yeah.
They're taking exclusivity to the max, which is something I know that a lot of people know now with PlayStation and Microsoft battling, but Nintendo's been doing it forever.
That's the biggest thing that Nintendo has going for them. Like the games they make are just so good and so like wide ranging in terms of like who they target, like the types of people they target. Like everybody, there is a Nintendo game for everybody, and it is so good that you need to buy a Nintendo console to play it. And so lots of people have Nintendo consoles, and it's all just games made by Nintendo. If the Switch came out and 0 games on it were made by anybody other than Nintendo, it would still be worth buying.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's a big reason I wanted Switch is the hype for Breath of the Wild just got to me. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I played that game for so many hours. It was totally worth it.
Me too. Yeah, it was great.
So another milestone for Nintendo was they released Wii Fit in 2008 with the balance board. Did you ever use a Wii Fit, Tyler?
Yeah, we had one with a balance board we picked up at a thrift shop in like 2014 probably.
That's awesome.
I don't think we ever actually used, but yes, we have one.
I used one new. I went back home for the holidays from college, and I used one at a friend's house, and it called me fat. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to get off this board and never use it again.
Oh, that's mean.
Yeah,
really?
I know.
It did that? That's pretty
It was
mean.
like your balance is all off and you're overweight. And I'm like, okay, let's just back off, Nintendo. All right? I don't need to hear this right now. So Satoru Iwata actually described that Nintendo has a blue ocean strategy, and I'd never heard of this term before. Have you heard of blue ocean strategy?
Yeah, blue ocean versus red ocean strategy.
Yeah, so essentially, if you haven't heard of this before, blue ocean strategy is about innovation. Like if you're innovating in the blue ocean, that's good because you're the first ones in there. You're brand new. If you're in the red ocean, that means the sharks are here and there's blood in the water and everyone's trying to copy you. So Nintendo has always tried to be the ones to innovate first. And you'll see this with fitness games at this time, but you'll also see it, I'm sure we'll get to it at a certain point, with the PlayStation Move and the Xbox Kinect trying to bring their motion controls in after the fact because Wii was so successful with it.
And that's not to say that red ocean is bad.
No.
You just have to be, if you're going into an area that you know is a red ocean, there's tons of other competition. You can't be like good enough. You have to be better than everything else. So you can still win by going into a red ocean. You just have to be the best. Whereas in a blue ocean, you just have to be there. You don't have to be the best because there is nothing else.
I think a good example of this in today's context would be PUBG was a blue ocean.
Yep.
But Fortnite's a red ocean, but they did it better.
That's right.
And so I think that would be a good comparison to like modern day of a battle royale being an ocean in this sense.
And if you're trying to make a battle royale today, you are going into a dark red ocean. Like it needs to be so much better if you're trying to win and like be the biggest one. It needs to be so much better than PUBG and Fortnite. And like it's probably at this point not worth it. But yeah, you're totally right.
All right. So now it's 2008 for the Wii. And they had their best year ever. This is the crescendo, as Kent calls it. 10.2 million consoles. So now you ask, how did Wii compare to the famous selling, most successful console of all time, the PlayStation 2? Well, you probably know the answer, but it just couldn't compete with the length of PS2's reign. PS2 was steadily selling for so long. Like, I forget, it was like 10 years they were selling PlayStation 2s.
Yeah, they sold them for, oh gosh. Like the last game that came out on PS2 was like FIFA 13 in Brazil or 14. Like it was crazy for so long. They kept making games for it.
Yeah, and the Wii was definitely like sprinting and fizzling out. So the Wii kind of stopped in like fizzled out in like 2009, 2010. In fact, the whole industry took an 8% drop in sales in 2009 because everyone at that point that bought consoles kind of bought one, and Rock Band and Guitar Hero games were falling out of style, and people just kind of like moved on. Like the hype train had reached its destination, and console sales. You're still seeing game sales, obviously, of new games coming out, but console-wise, the whole industry kind of slowed down. And even though we sprinted and sort of fizzled out by 2009, by the end of its life cycle, we had sold 101.5 million systems worldwide.
That's so many systems.
It's so amazing. And also, the software they put out for the Wii was still good up until the very end. They had Super Mario Kart Wii. That was in 2008. Then you have New Super Mario Brothers. And then and that was released in 2009. And New Super Mario Brothers was the best-selling Wii game in 2009 and 2010. So it had like a 2-year reign over sales for the Wii.
Dang.
Then you have Wii Fit Plus and Super Mario Galaxy 2, which I know is a huge game, and I think all of us are waiting for a Switch re-release of Super Mario Galaxy 2. I think we're going to get that. But so the Wii had the best time, even though it was kind of like definitely like a burning bright star, you know, that shone brightly for a bit and then kind of faded away. It still really took over. And we're going to stop here in the middle of this chapter because it's kind of long, so we'll finish it next week. But Tyler, what you been playing?
Well, I spent some time. So last weekend, I finally finished Ruined King. I might have talked about that last week on the show. I think I did.
How was that? You had some final boss like strategy going on because we were like talking over Discord while you were doing it, and I was like, "This is intense."
Well, I got to the final boss, and it's one of those final bosses that is just like extremely long, or at least it was for me because maybe I hadn't prepared enough for it. But I got like half an hour or what felt like half an hour into this final boss fight. And then I got like one shot by some BS, of course, that it's always BS when I lose because I'm not bad at video games. Video games are only bad to me.
That's right.
You heard it here first. Nobody is bad at video games. It's always the game's fault. So I was so upset by it. I didn't want to just try again because I was like, well, what if I make it half an hour in again and this happens again? It's like, how can I keep this from happening? So I hit level cap again. The game is pretty well paced. So by the time I hit level cap, it didn't take like a whole lot of grinding after the game to hit that. Like they don't really let you grind much. And then I went and I did the quest to get the ultimate weapon for Ari, one of the characters. I was going to get all the ultimate weapons, but then I got about 3 hours into one ultimate weapon quest, and I was like, maybe I'll just get one ultimate weapon. So I got one, and then I went back and I beat the final boss, and it did not take half an hour. It probably took 10 minutes, but I beat him. It was great. Felt awesome. I love that game. It was super fun. Then this weekend, I finished Halo Infinite, finally. I just sat down yesterday and I just like really crushed it and played a lot of I played all the story mission stuff. Really enjoyed that. I didn't do all of the open world stuff. I did kind of whatever was sort of on the way in between story missions. And that all was pretty fun. I thought most of the encounters, like combat encounters, were pretty fun. There was some weird one-shotting baloney that was getting me at some points.
Oh, that
and
final
I did
boss.
have to. Yeah. Oh well. So I got to the third to last boss, and I kept dying on it's the elite that you fight. Mm-hmm. And I kept dying to him, and I was like, this is a bunch of baloney. So I switched to PC because I've been playing on my controller. I've been playing on my PC, but I was playing on my TV on a controller. So I switched to mouse and keyboard on my battle station, and I totally wrecked him first try. I didn't have any more problems with bosses after that. I just totally beat the rest of the game sitting at my computer mouse and keyboard style, but I was just playing on normal difficulty because I'm bad at video games, and it was very fun. I thought it was the perfect level of difficulty for me.
Honestly, you doing that normal difficulty was the right choice because I got so mad at the last two bosses in that game playing on heroic. So
yeah,
it was pretty rough for me as far as trying to beat that last boss, especially because the last boss, there's like waves of enemies. It's in phases, right? And the last phase involves this really tough hammer brute, and he'll just chase you the entire round. And so you got to run around your arena and just keep grappling hooking and like peppering him down and hope he doesn't catch up to you. And I must have died like 10 times to that guy.
Because those guys that the brutes in the red armor that just run at you, they look like they're glitched with how fast they move.
Oh, they move
look
so
like there's
quick.
some strange glitch happening, but it happened every single time, so it must have been intended. But they run so fast.
Some of
their
them,
animations is so weird looking.
On like heroic, some of those brutes, not the fast running ones, but the hammer ones, take like 4 skewer shots to kill.
Jeez.
It's crazy if you miss. I mean, I'm probably doing it wrong. I'm probably, missing, but still, it was rough. But yeah, I loved it though. I beat most of the side content in Halo Infinite, but I did get to a point where I was just ready to move on.
That's okay. Game's on Game Pass. You don't even need to feel like you got your money's worth out of it,
Exactly. It was really fun. I enjoyed it. So this week, I'm still on the Witcher 3 and the Jurassic World Evolution 2 vibe. I definitely have played more Jurassic World Evolution this week because I'm really just trying to get through it because I love it so much. I'm having really a lot of fun. I just made an Indominus Rex, so that's cool. But it's happy. Nothing's going to go wrong. Everything's going to be fine. So it'll be great. But nice. The Witcher 3, I just finished the Baron's quest, so I think I'm like ready to go to the next area in the Witcher 3, but I'm having so much fun with these side quests. Like I'm really enjoying myself, So
good.
I might spend more time in Velen than I need to, They need to make it fit. Someone's probably done it, like tourism posters from the areas of Witcher 3. It had to be made.
I'm sure they have.
Yeah, like come to Velen, beautiful Velen, with the 3 crones and the creepy witches. It's really good. Okay. But yeah, I had a good time with that. Do you want to read some emails?
Yeah, sure. I've got one here from Philip. He says, the subject of this is on your 200th. So, hey there. Can you guys believe you're almost to 200 episodes? Did you ever imagine in a million metaverses you'd have 200 episodes? I was wondering, well, to answer that question, no, absolutely not. It's crazy that we have continued to do this for so long. I'm glad that we have, and I'm glad that you all are listening to us still for almost 200 episodes. But Philip goes on to say, I was wondering, unless you've already done this, on the 200th episode, it would be fun to have a little inside baseball episode. I'd be interested in hearing how you landed on the name, the logo, theme music, what were your alternatives? In general, what was your overall thought process as you both started this endeavor? Was there a Pete Best-like third member that just didn't work out and you had to drop early? Was there a Mario and Luigi-like jump and high five as your verbal contract? What were your biggest flubs early on? Anything you would have done different? How did the pandemic change your plans, if at all, etc.? Anywho, just an idea? Carry on, gents. Phil.
That sounds like a good idea. Yeah, thanks, Phil. I like that idea. Yeah. I also like our movie commentaries, though. So maybe we do like this as the episode, and we do a fun, silly movie commentary.
Yeah, we could still do another movie commentary. That was fun.
Let us know if you like those or not. Because we did that. We did it with Doom
for our 100th episode. Yeah, go back and you have to sync it up with the movie yourself. So it's like a riff tracks, Mystery Science Theater. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I had a good time with that. And now there's so many fun video game movies to watch and enjoy.
There are good ones too now.
I know. I heard the Sonic movie is good.
It's worth watching. I enjoyed it. You know what? I'm not ashamed to say that I very much enjoyed the Sonic movie. I mean, not necessarily as a good Sonic movie. Like it's not. It just has Sonic the character and Dr. Robotnik the characters in it. It doesn't like take place in Mobius or anything like that. But it's still fun. Detective Pikachu though.
Oh, that's a great movie. Oh, I should rewatch that. That's got to be on something, right? Good. But yeah, I like all that stuff, Phil. We'll take care of that for you, I think, in episode 200. That'll be fun. All right. The next email is from Kenny W. And the subject line is SACD, Super Audio CDs. Here we go. Hey guys, per your request on episode 184, I am replying to let you know that I did buy Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon on Super Audio CD. And I will say that it sounded better than the standard CD.
Okay.
It was mastered for 5.1 surround sound, so you get the most out of it. You would want to play it on a surround sound system. So playing it on a regular stereo or in your car probably wouldn't knock your socks off. Another format that didn't really take off was DVD audio, which played on any player that played DVDs, but they were expensive. Keep up the good work, and a spider butt multiplier for both of you, Kenny W. Oh, thank you for the spider butt multiplier. That's nice.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think Dark Side of the Moon would be the one to do it. And I think when you say that it was mastered for 5.1 surround sound, that sounds like where the like this is where the big difference is. So maybe you don't hear as much of a difference if you're like just listening on your headphones, but because standard audio CDs are just stereo. So it's just left and right channels, but on a 5.1 system, you could actually have, if the music is made with it in mind, like just adding speakers doesn't make something better, but if the music is made with that in mind to have things move around, I can imagine it being much better on Super Audio CD for that reason. But you'd need like all the equipment. You need to be like sitting in the right spot in your room. This isn't like, I'm going to load up the Super Audio version on my iPod and like listen to it. You need to be like, it's an experience that you're sitting down to experience something.
Makes me think they had Super Audio CDs for like Laser Floyd. You know, I went and saw one of those one time. One like those laser show Pink Floyd things. Cool. It was pretty cool.
I went to what was it? What kind of stuff like was a laser?
I mean, it was like they had like lasers that were through the room and stuff, but really you're watching this like screen and it's some really, well, quite frankly, bad looking 3D CGI.
Sweet, love it.
It was probably a really cool thing in like the 80s, and they brought it back to this like planetarium, and we went with some friends and we were just like, oh yeah, that was a thing.
Oh man, I went to the downtown Los Angeles, or not in downtown, in Hollywood. They had a Pink Floyd like exhibit where they just had like tons of like Pink Floyd stuff on display. We went to that a couple weeks ago and it was a lot of fun. I really love Pink Floyd. I'm a fan, so I would love to see that laser show sometime.
Yeah, I mean, it was the full CD. It was a whole show, you know.
Dark Side of the Moon.
Mm-hmm. I feel like you definitely would need some sort of alternative way of altering your mood. Clean podcast,
sure,
to really enjoy it. But yeah, so it was fun. Anyway, that's all the emails we got this week, and thank you so much for listening. If you want to send us an email, you can do that at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. If you want to join our Discord, you can email us or go to my Twitter page @mecoletta and MECOLETTA and click on the pinned tweet at the top of my profile. That's a link that never expires. You can also find Tyler on Twitter @SneakerElf, ELPH. And that's it. Do you want to say bye to everyone?
Yeah. Goodbye, everyone.
This has been a Podaholics Comedy Network presentation. Podaholics.com